In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we would like to welcome all the attendees and the esteemed guests who are going to participate with us today in today's lecture about the follow-up and the reading of the political and geostrategic conditions and circumstances in the West Africa after the coup that happened in the recent periods of time. And I'd like to remind all the attendees and the speakers who are going to participate with us in this lecture organized by King Faisal Center for Research in Islamic Studies from Riyadh. The first speaker is Professor Fayoumi, a full-time professor of international relations at the Nigerian Military University, and Dr. Jamal Din Muhammad, the professor of Arabic language in the Islamic University from Niger, from Miami, the capital city, and Dr. Vasily Kuznetsov, the vice director of the Orientalism Institute from the Russian Academy for Science, and from Cairo, Dr. Iman Abdeladim, professor of political science, politics and economy college, Cairo University. In the recent periods of time, Niger, since large periods of time, witnessed the military coup against Bazoum, the elected president. And the region has witnessed many military coups in the recent years. And these series of military coups changed the face of the region and had its consequences regionally and internationally. We can remind you of some of these military coups that happened since 2020. Mali witnessed 2 military coups in August 2020, then May 2021, that got the leader of military coup, Assimi Bouita, to power on the expense of Ibrahim Barkita, the president, the ex-president. And in May 2021, there was an attempt for a military coup in Niger against Mohamed Bazoum, but it wasn't announced, it wasn't declared. In Niger, in July 2023, a successful military coup led by Abdurrahman Chiani against Mohamed Bazoum, the president. As for Chad, and after the murder of Deby, the president, there was a coup led by his son, and he was appointed, Mohamed Idris Deby, he was appointed as the president temporarily, and the transitional period is still ongoing until now. In Guinea, in September 2021, there was a military coup led by Mamadi Doumbouya against President Alpha Conde, but it was not stable, and there was another coup in January 2022 led by Officer Paul Henry Sandwago Dambia, and this happened in Burkina Faso, sorry, and it was against Rochmar Kabori. After that, another coup that happened in September 2022, led by Ibrahim Traoré against the leader of the military coup, the first military coup, Paul Henry Sandwago. Outside of the Western Africa region, there was recently, at the end of August, a military coup in Gabon against Ali Bongo and leading Police Origi, the General Police Origi Enigma. So we have a series of military coups that led to the change of the face of this region and affected and impacted the regional situation as well as the local situation as well. What are the parties that participated directly or indirectly and got involved in these incidents? Is it because of internal conflicts, or is it because of regional and international interferences? What is the international situation of toward these coups? What is the situation of the international organizations? What is the future of this region in light of these new circumstances? The first speaker will be Dr. Professor Fayoumi from Niger. Dr. Fayoumi is going to speak for 20 minutes. After that, we will receive the next speaker, then the next speaker, until in the end, we will have a discussion, a Q&A session from the participants. And now the speech is for Professor Fayoumi from Nigeria.
Dr. Fayoumi. Dr. Fayoumi.
Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you.
Yes. Am I supposed to start now? Yeah, because you did not speak English at all, so I didn't really. Can I start my presentation? Okay.
تفضل دكتورة.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me now? Okay, you can hear me? Okay. I want to align with the existing protocol. I want to appreciate Dr. Mohamed Asbitli of Head of African Studies Program for inviting me. My presentation is titled "The Spate of Coup d'etat in West Africa: Implications for Sub-regional, Regional, and International Politics." I'm going to start my presentation with a quotation from the President of ECOWAS and President of Nigeria. It's also the President of Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu. And I quote, "You cannot have a stable democracy in the presence of poverty of knowledge and the poverty of people. Democracy without food on the table is a breeding ground for what we consume us if care is not taken." So what is happening in West Africa today is extreme poverty. It's as a result of extreme poverty. It's as a result of lack of food on the table. It's as a result of people suffering. And that is why we are having this spate, this wave of coup d'etat in West Africa. Now, can you hear me? I should continue. Now, I move to the introductory aspects of this presentation. Africa has 54 recognized independent countries on the continent, and the continent is divided into 5 sub-regions We have the Northern Africa, we have the Eastern Africa, we have the Southern Africa, we have the Central Africa, we also have the Western Africa within the continent of Africa. And I move to the second slide, which states that the continent of Africa and the international community witnessed and also observed significant increase in coup d'etat between 2013 and 2023. And it became pronounced from 2020 to 2023. That is, within these 3 years, the military interventions became very, very pronounced. In these following countries, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Sudan, in Guinea, in Chad, and Niger, and in Gabon. Now, what is the statement of the problem? The problem itself has to do with the fact that there is a wave of military takeovers in the Francophone countries of West Africa. These are countries, these are former colonies of France. The coup d'etat did not take place in any of the Anglophone countries of West Africa. There were 2 attempts of coup in the Gambia, which is an Anglophone country, but these 2 attempts were foiled. But the attempts in the Francophone countries were very successful. And it all happened in the Francophone countries of West Africa. Now I'm going to zero in on West Africa now, that the current power grabs in West African sub-region have raised concerns that the sub-region may be backsliding from its progress towards significant democracy. Now, this is the map of Africa showing the 5 sub-regions in Africa. And I move to West African sub-regional integration called ECOWAS. ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States. It was established in May 28, 1975. And this federation has 15 West African countries. And the purpose for establishing this ECOWAS is to provide the condition of being self-sustainable for its member states and to create a single trading market and economic cooperation. And I want to let you know that at the formation of ECOWAS in 1975, there were 16 independent countries that joined. In the year 2000, Mauritania pulled out of ECOWAS, and it now became 50 membership now. At the formation of ECOWAS, it was actually 60 members. Mauritania pulled out in year 2000 December and joined the Maghreb. That is as the historical antecedent of ECOWAS. Now I'm going to move into the geostrategic perspectives. Now, these are the member states of ECOWAS, 15 membership. And out of these 15 membership, 8 countries are in Francophone countries. 5 countries are Anglophone, and 2 are Lusophone. In the Francophone West African countries, they speak French. Their former colonizer is France. In the Anglophone countries, where we have just 5 countries, the former colonizer is Britain. In the Lusophone, we have 2. And the 2 Lusophone countries are the Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. And the lingua franca in these 2 countries is Portuguese, because they were colonized by Portugal. So these are the 15 membership of ECOWAS that we have today. Now, from geostrategic perspectives, it should be noted that the common purpose of member states that is guided by the vision of moving from ECOWAS of states to ECOWAS of the people by year 2020 did not come into fruition. It's yet to become a reality. Now ECOWAS ECOWAS is it can be categorized as ECOWAS of states, not ECOWAS of the people. If it is ECOWAS of the people, then it will be people-centered. Now, ECOWAS is not people-centered, it's ECOWAS of states. And that is the reason, that is one of the reasons we are also having this spate, this wave of coup d'etat in West African sub-region. Now, this is the political map of West Africa. In this political map of Africa, it shows the countries, international borders, national capitals, and major cities. And you could see from this map, you will see Mauritania. Mauritania is close to Mali. Mali is close to Niger. And you will see the configuration of these countries in terms of borders, in terms of capital cities, in terms of geopolitical setting. Now, and I move to the recent, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry, there's a mix up there. I want to move to the, I'll move to the recent coup belt with recent coup d'etat in West Africa in the context of coup belt. Now, between August 2020 and July 2023, West African sub-region experienced military coup in 4 West African countries, meaning that there were successful military coup in 4 West African countries. There were 5 attempts, but 4 were successful. Mali, on the 18th of August 2020, there was a military coup. And there was another counter coup on the 24th of May, 2021. In Guinea, on the 5th of September 2021, there was a successful military coup. In Burkina Faso, on the 23rd of January 2022, there was a successful military coup. And on the 30th of September 2022, there was a counter coup. In Niger, there was a successful military coup on the 26th of July 2023. And we need to note this. The coup attempt in the Gambia between 2022 and also in 2021 were not successful. The coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau in 2022, 2020, and 2019 were not successful. Now, let's move to the sub-regional implications. From the perspective of sub-regional implications, we are looking at ECOWAS action against the coup d'etat, the wave of coup d'etat. All these 4 militarized West African states have been suspended by ECOWAS, despite the fact that they are struggling with transnational insurgent group of ISIS. And on Saturday, 16th of September, the 3 of the 4 military-led West African countries signed a security threat that will make them support one another against external aggression. And the treaty, which was signed on Saturday, 16th of September, in development, is a development that happened that appeared to counter the threat posed by the ECOWAS. And 3 countries signed: Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Guinea did not sign. Guinea is not a party to that signatory. Now, let's look at it from the regional implications. Looking at it from regional implications, we are looking at African Union action. The spate of coup d'etat in West Africa has been condemned by the African Union Peace Security Council, this council condemned and expressed deep concern about the resurgence of military coup in West Africa, which undermined democracy, peace, and security in the African continent. And the African leaders also supported the suspension of these militarized West African states. Now, let's look at the implications for international politics. We are going to anchor it on the exemplification of Hans Morgenthau in his book, Politics Among Nations, which emphasized that international politics is a struggle for power among nations. Although he argued that not all interstate relations are political, they can also be economic reasons. Now, from the global perspective, we discovered there's a strained diplomatic relations between France and our former colonies in the Francophone West African states. And this was also manifested in the relations between Russia and the US. And from the way the activities are ongoing, there seems to be a bifurcation of international system. And I believe that there will not be a revisitation of the Cold War in this 21st century, because now international system is bifurcated between the supporters of the Russia and also the supporter of the US. Now, let's now look at factors that engender coup d'etat in West African states. These factors are interrelated, complicated, complex, to the extent that you will see bad leadership and also misguided followership. So it is not only about leadership problem, even the followership are also misguided, can also behave irresponsibly. And there is the second factor, which I'm also going to discuss here, is also the display of ineffective democratic governance, which denied the populace of West Africa the dividends of democracy. A greater populace of West Africans are denied the dividends of democracy. And the number three factor has to do with the issues of high levels of corruption, nepotism, insurgency, election rigging, poor educational facilities and infrastructure, the undue extension of terms in elective positions, ill-equipped military, and extreme poverty. That is the third factor that actually engender, wave of coup d'etat in West Africa. Now, number fourth reason or factor is one-sided development. One-sided development. Exploitation of the mineral resources in the West African sub-region, especially the Francophone countries who have abundant natural resources of uranium, gold, diamonds, and etc. So this viewpoint is actually corroborated by the late French President Jacques Chirac, who acknowledged the fact that, and I quote him, without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power, quote and unquote. Now, having enumerated the factors that engender, incensed coup d'etat in West Africa, let's look at the agenda for actions. What should be done to alter the coup belts? Number one, West African leaders should be cautious in their diplomatic relations with the international community, especially Europe and America. The foreign policy engagement should be symbiotic, so it should be beneficial to the two parties. Then the West African leaders should govern effectively and ensure the citizens partake in the dividends of democracy. And oh my God. And number three, excuse me. Number three agenda for action is that students, scholars, CSOs, and should advocate for democratic governance. They should criticize military interventions in their entirety. And the West African countries should also be united and emulate the South American model of unity in diversity. And I hereby conclude by emphasizing the fact that if you look at the UN report on the poorest countries in the world, the 10 poorest countries in the world, 5 Francophone countries are part of the first 10 poorest countries in the world. This report was released this month, September. And despite the abundant natural resources, these militarized Francophone West African countries still suffer extreme poverty. And generally now, West African countries, whether Anglophone or Lusophone or Francophone, need to be cautious about their diplomatic relations with potential partners within the international system. Thanks for listening.
شكرا دكتور فيومي. الآن إذن وبعد هذا العرض.
Now and after this presentation, we'll move to Dr. Jamal. Dr. Jamal, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Dr. Jamaluddin Muhammad, the professor of Arabic language at the Islamic University in Niger. You're speaking to us from Niamey, the capital city, and you have a point of view regarding what happened in Niger recently, which is the coup against President Bazoum. So you think that there are many justifications pro the coup, and that there is people like public opinion and justifications for people who are supporting this military coup against the elected president. So if democracy does not lead, does not perform its role, then any military person needs to intervene and make a coup against the president. So there are no political rules upon which a state can be built. So Dr. Jamal, go ahead. Just explain to us your point of view regarding the coup in Niger. Good evening. In the beginning, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. In the beginning, I'd like to thank King Faisal Center for hosting us, and I hope that we will benefit from what I'm going to mention regarding the situation in Niger after the military coup against the President Bazoum and its regional consequences and local consequences as well. My intervention will be in 4 points. The first point, in which I'm going to speak about coups, military coups in Niger and their history. Is it new? Does it have an old history in our country? Also, I'm going to speak about why the coup in Niger is a global situation, while we find that there are many other coups in a way or another, but the world, these things in Niger. And another point is related to the implications of this coup on the level of the state and on the regional and international levels as well. As for the military coup in Niger, I think that democracy is ancient in Niger, as old as independence. Independence started with democracy, which is the elections, electing the president through the boxes of elections. But this election and the elected president, which was the first president of Niger, Zori Hamani, stayed for a while as a president. At the end of his term, he was accused of uh, corruption. Maybe some say that coup against him was by the urgence by the French occupation, by the French power, because of uranium, and also he was trying to reprice the uranium, how to divide it. And at that time, it was like they say that it was because of instigated by France and incited by France, and people were not very aware. And after that, there was a coup, and another president came by military coup and prevented the political parties. And he was, and it's to say, we don't need democracy because our peoples are retarded peoples intellectually. So why do they need democracy? He said that democracy doesn't work with retarded peoples. So he thinks that people who were not educated and intellectual, we don't need it. We need dictatorship. But he was a general. After he died, Ali Shogu came. Ali Shogu is another president, and he inherited. He was the chief of staff of the army, and he um, governed Niger, but there was internal revolution from the labor uh, people and the students and others, and he was forced to accept that there is a national conference that leads to a new democratic state, and he accepted that, and it happened until another new president was elected in 1993, which is Mohammed Osman. After that, Mohammed Osman found himself in, while he was a president, after 1 or 2 years, he found that he cannot govern because the prime minister is not from his own party. And as you know, democracy has different systems, presidential, semi-presidential system. Semi-presidential system in which prime minister shares power with the president. So the prime minister wasn't from his party, so a lot of problems arose between them, and the military intervened. And since that time, the military intervened to against democratic governance, because there is no way out. I think because democracy did not find a way out, so the military comes to solve the situation and gives the gives power back to democrats. And this is what always happened when democrats can't find the safe side. The military always intervenes until they put the state back to democracy on the right track. So that's why we found that democracy in Niger always between military and civilian. If the civilian don't know how to do it, the military side comes to solve the problem. And this is what happened after Ballet, that was killed by the presidential guard. And after the presidential guard, and after Barry was killed, the Commander Malik Kwanke became the president. And also after he organized elections, he stepped aside, and Prince Tanja took power, and Prince Tanja could achieve a lot of results in the state, but at the same time, he put the state in a phase that cannot be accepted. He wanted to majestify his own regime, and he wanted to extend it for 3 years after he finished his term. He was elected for 2 times, and he should leave and rest, but he did not do that, and he asked for 3 years as an extension to work on some projects that he started, and he'll democratic so that it's against the constitution. So a lot of demonstrations and uprising went out from the citizens and the parties and went against him. And the military took the advantage and they made the military coup against Tanja. So this happened, and he wanted to put the state back on democracy. So in these periods, democracy has its weight and the state has its own view that democracy is the only way that will lead to development and acceptance. But after coup against Tanja, Muhammad Yusuf came back to power, and Muhammad Yusuf from Bazoum, and if you notice, Bazoum president was elected, but in circumstances that many people urged some problems regarding choosing him, because after he continued his 2 terms, for 10 years, he was preparing that Bazoum will be his own successor, and from inside the Bazoum party, and there were a lot of opposition from his own party against Bazoum. But at the end of the day, it was controlled, and Bazoum became the nominated from the party, and he became the president of the state. And you can find that Bazoum came in conditions where security circumstances and public demands are higher, and they have been waiting. The people were waiting for a democratic elected government. So the security deterioration and the proliferation of corruption and the increase of unemployment and poverty made people always uprising, and they were always moving, trying to find a solution or a change. But through democracy, this will be difficult because Bazoum has a period of time that will allow him to stay in power for 5 years. But how can he be stopped? The street will not be able to prevent Bazoum from ruling the 5 years that are available for him. So demonstrations were not allowed, and this is in a democratic country. It it should be demonstration should be the right for peoples, and the Western countries used to see and hear, and France used to see and hear, but they overlooked all the violations of the constitution and the violations of all of the democratic game. So the people moved through media and modern media, especially Facebook and WhatsApp and others, these new social media platforms that urge people to move. And if they cannot move in the street, they can still do that demonstration through these means. And this is what happened until the 26th of July. People woke up on the news that the government chaired by Bazoum was forced to step aside, and there was a military coup, and the constitution was cancelled and revoked. So this coup in this time did not come for the sake of democracy as its motto. And as you see that their mottos and slogans are nationalism, and this is very dangerous, that soldiers say that Bazoum and his party are trying to sell our nation, or to destroy our nation, and they came to get the nation back to the citizens. This retrieval was not accepted by the friends of Bazoum, like France in the first place, and some and others also. And this question regarding that they were convinced of many of the projects that were presented by Bazoum president, and they accept most of the shootings at that time. And also they came with like 3 or 4 of the military leaders to Niger, and they think that Bazoum is an ally for him, and they cannot accept coup, but they accepted coup in other places, but in Niger, I think they started for many reasons. So, about the next days will tell us about the real causes. So, the coup in Niger, why is it a global event? Because the whole world focused on Niger instead of focusing on anywhere else, and Niger became the conflict zone. For example, America, the United States had their own bases here, Germany, France, and uh, have soldiers here. France has a base here, and others, many other countries. Some of them are known, and some of them are secret. We don't know which exactly are the soldiers here in Niger. So the local implications of this coup are much, but we can identify them in two main aspects. The first thing is that Niger people, after this coup, felt very national, and they started feeling nationalism, and they started looking for a better solution, and they found that their country, after the coup against Bazoum, is the talk of the hour. No news agency is not talking about Niger, and Niger has become the talk of the global media in for month or more than 1 month. And I think until now you can find some information about Niger. So the citizens were found it strange. Why is it so much interesting for others? There were other coups in Kenya, Mali, and other places, but it wasn't treated in the media like this coup against Bazoum. So there is something. So here, citizens asked themselves, Bazoum has hidden secrets with Westerners. So that's why they're trying to get Bazoum back to power. Whatever happens, he should get back, even if it requires military invasion or intervention. And France is still waving with this card to protect their purposes, and we don't know what is the confidentiality of these relations, and that will lead to military intervention. Coup happened in many other places, but this was not the talk of the hour. Also, another thing that is very important is that Nigerians have, before the coup against Bazoum, they were willing, saying that their state has a lot of natural resources, but most of the people are poor. So it is difficult to find someone from Niger that eats 3 full meals a day. But we find that politicians who are in power possess billions, and they have billions of dollars. So we find now that the people now are aware of all of this. And you notice after that the military council cancelled military agreements with France since the 5th of September. Thousands of youth are in demonstrations every Saturday and sometimes every Monday, and they find them in front of, and they don't uh, go to this place until the French forces leave Niger. So this insistence on getting France out of Niger is one of the issues that the Niger people see as a priority now, that France needs to take our base and get out of Niger, and they need to change their policy towards Niger if they want to be a friend country like any other country. Niger does not refuse relations with others, but this relation should be uh, equal, based on equality between a country and another country according to the international global charters. Because of the limited time, Dr. Jamal, if you conclude, please. So, generally speaking, I can speak in conclusion about the regional consequences of that coup. You can notice that since the implication or the coup in Niger, there are, for example, different communications between different presidents who rule these countries, and Burkina Faso and Niger and others, and they're trying to have a unified vision regarding what happens in the region, and also regarding the place that is called the Triangle Border, which is the place that France put their forces there in this place, because this place is called so. As you see here, there was an agreement, a defense agreement between Niger, the Burkina Faso, and Mali, that these countries that connect them to, and I think that this is a birth of a new coalition or a new ally. This coalition is the coalition of the coast countries, as it was named, and I think it might be a core for many other international organizations to intervene if they want to deal with this region in a way or another, especially Russia. And I think that Russia will make use or take the advantage of this coalition, because Russia has a presence in Mali on the ground. But in Niger, until now, there is no one Russian soldier. But with this coalition, Russia might take advantage of this opportunity to have their own places in nature and in the future. This impact is what the Americas refuse, and the same with France. وكذلك, but because of their wrong or mistaken politics of dealing with the Kulu, I think the America and the France opened the road for Russia, and I think that Russia will have an important outcome on this coalition that was established in the September 6th in the 3 different countries, and they called it the coalition of these organizations. And so, in a nutshell, what we have in mind now are with that we have a lot of points, and I hope in the next future I'd like to understand them better. Thank you for hosting us, and maybe I did not say all what I have, but because of the limited time, thank you very much. In the Q&A and discussions, we can get back to whatever more information you have, and you'll answer some questions, and you'll continue what was not said in the intervention. Thank you very much. The third speaker, we will apologize for Dr. Azeri, because we will start with Dr. Iman. Dr. Fasili, would you like wait? And because electricity might go off with Dr. Iman. So if you allow me, Dr. Fasili, if you allow me, we'll start with Dr. Iman, because electricity might go off in Cairo. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Fasili. Dr. Iman, regarding the decreasing role of France in the region, what is your reading? How do you read the situation now? And do you think that Russia has some kind of intervention in this kind of coup in a way or another? Or do you think that the United States of America is the power that will be replacing France? So generally speaking, what is your reading of the incidents? Sorry, Dr. Fasili, for allowing. It's out of my hand. First of all, I'd like to thank King Faisal's management for inviting us. And I'd like to thank Dr. Mohammed Subhetli for moderating the session. I'd like also to thank the beautiful ladies organizing today, Ms. Haifa, Ms. Lina, and Ms. Khloud, and all the team. My intervention is based on 3 main points. First, why are we speaking about military coup in Western Africa in specific? The second, why is Niger coup is different from other coups that happen in Africa? The third point, what are the implications of that on the international situation, and especially the competition between different powers like Russia, France, and others? First point, why are we speaking about West African coup in specific? Because historically, the East Africa was known of internal conflicts and civil wars, but the West African region has always, or for a historical period of time, was known for military coups. So since the 90s of the 20th century, military coup was focused in Western Africa, especially the coast uh, part. But between 25 military coups successful since 1990 until now in the Africa, 20 of them were in West Africa, 12 in the coast and 8 in Guinea Gulf area. So because of this indication, it seems that the rate of coup in the coast is going towards more increase. And also another thing that is clearer here is that Western Africa had a lot of military coups, and because the easiness of performing them in this area, also that military coup in Western Africa leads to radical change in the formation of power and creates a new reality regionally and internationally. And I'd like to refer here that we need to differentiate precisely uh, or describe precisely the military coup. The military coup that happened in Sudan 2019 and Mali 2020, the description is that the military organization responded to demands from the public against an elected power. But what happened in Mali 2021 is that the military organization went against an elected or a government that was not elected but was based on conformity. Also, what happened in Guinea, Conakry, or Burkina Faso 2021, or even Niger 2023, is that branch military groups inside the military organization took over military organization, and they also took over the countries. So here we find that the military organization Niger started to stop dangerous circumstances that will lead to violence in the cities. So saying that military coup for all the areas, things that happened in Central or Western Africa need to be with the context. So that's regarding the first point. Why are we speaking about Western Africa's coup? Another thing, why is it different in Niger from what happened in the West or the middle or the Central Africa? I think in order to answer this question, I need to compare between Niger's coup and Al Japon coup in order to make things clearer, because they were close to each other. Niger 2023 and Japon 2023. It's only 1 month between them. So we need to link between two of them. But also there is another fact that military coup in Africa is something repetitive in the African continent since the first coup that happened against Ghana's President One Kuma in 1966. But we shouldn't say that these coups are the same. We need to take in consideration the causes behind them and their consequences and the level of the parties. So if I'm going to put some points to differentiate between different military coups that happened in Niger and Gabon. So regarding of the causes for Niger, for example, according to what was said by those who made the call, said that security issues were the main cause and main driver. And this happened in all of the coups on the coast of West Africa, like Mali 2020 and Mali 2021, Burkina Faso 2022, and the transitional power in Chad 2023. But there is a point that I want to mention that, honestly speaking, because the security situation in Bazoum president time was improved better than others compared to other coastal countries, and this is documented. Political violence in Bazoum decreased by 39% compared to 2021. Attacks against civilians decreased by 49% compared to 2021. So we shouldn't just believe what they said without refuting them. Also, another thing that causes in Niger started to develop, like what happened in the rest of the Sahel of the coast countries, which is the idea of expelling France, and this was common between this and other coups that happened with the rest of the Western African countries, and they are trying to win the public opinion in Niger. And I think this is correct. They always say that France is accused of taking over the natural resources in these countries, especially Niger. That Niger is considered, according to the Human Development, it's the last, while they have a lot of resources. So there are accusation fingers pointing against France in specific. So things started to develop more, and we started seeing that there are other reasons behind Niger's coup, maybe a hidden conflict on the gold and fuel and oil management. So the current president and the previous president, which is Mohammed Yusuf. And I think there are many reports that talked about that, and that there was disagreement between the two camps regarding the management of oil and gold, and the idea that Bazoum fired the son of Mohammed Yusuf, but because of the he dismissed Sami ibn Yusuf because of disagreements. So that's why many reports say that the increasing intensive disagreements between the Mohammed Bazoum, the current president, and the camp of the previous president. Of course, the previous president, he was in power for 2 terms, elected terms, and he has a lot of power inside the country, and also it developed because there is restless between the presidential guards and the president's government, and he also fired and dismissed the head of the presidential guard, Abdurrahman Chan, and a lot of problems. So if we want to speak about all of these causes, we found that there are security reasons, but we can answer that by saying that this was not the real reason. I think that we agree regarding France, but I think things started to develop that there are hidden conflicts between the two president camps. So we need to take care of this. If we want to speak about the Gabon case is very different. If you want to speak about the coups that happened in the West, that the common denominator was the security problems and crises. But in Gabon, it's different. Gabon is stable, but they suffer from mismanagement being in Africa. So the coup that happened in Gabon was based on political problems. Gabon family that is for more than a half a century are governing the country, and they are accused of destroying the fuel and the oil treasures of the country, and their elections in 2023, and the opposition said that these elections were corrupt and there was false elections, and the military starting to be attentive that the state might go to a state of violence, and we are not letting that happen. So what happened in Japan might be considered as the political game ending coup. So I just wanted to mention that in order to know that causes that led to coups are different, whether in the West or in the Central. So we cannot put all of them in one basket. And another point related to the internal public opinion, I disagree with Mr. Jamal on that Niger's coup does not have all this kind of support internally in the state. Simply speaking, Abdurrahman al-Cheri, the head of the military council, is leading a coup that is not agreed on inside the military organization. Modi, that was couped by Bazoum, there is an accusation that this person will be making another coup. Also, people who made the coup are saying that economic presence, economically and militarily, is a main point that to talk about, and that Bazoum has strong relations with Paris. And we found that when he appeared in Parliament of Niger 2022, he said that passed a law that foreign forces might be there, and that led to the existence of many foreign forces. And I agree that this led to a lot of oppositions from the street and the public opinion in Niger. But we also found that there are many other areas related to Al Japunan, including, for example, the existence of a resistance for democracy in 2023, by Issa Agapola, the ex-minister, and this council started to doubt the coup and accused the coup of being insurgent soldiers who are not organized. And also Sarah Baroum, the Liberation Front, they were against the current military coup. And there is another important point, which is that the possibility of having counter coup inside that coup, this is existing. And the idea is that the Niger's foreign affairs refused that the coup against Bazoum, and he considers himself now an acting head of the government. So this proves that there are a lot of people against the coup. And there is another point, is that the current military governing personnel in Niger, they don't have the effective tool to stabilize their existence, because Niger is very complicated, as very poor country. And also another point, I don't want to be understood that Bazoum might return. Bazoum's return is like impossible, it's like imaginary. And the military coup is recognized, and Niger was represented in the 78th round in New York at the United Nations by the foreign minister of the coup instead of the foreign minister of Bazoum. So the return of Bazoum is impossible. But what I want to mention here is that the military coup in Niger is not totally accepted. Maybe there are people, there is maybe a minimum level of acceptance, but at the end of the day, there is presidential council that is not fully agreed on. But in Gabon, it's different. There is support from the military organization. There is support from the presidential guard. There is support from the public opinion in Gabon. So there's some kind of mobilization for the public opinion for years against Omar Bongo's policies. So the military council, who's governing now in Japan, has big share of support, and they have effective tools to stabilize their position and power through like the expropriation of the bank credits of the government of the previous president. So it's different from Jabun. So the idea of the previous coup experience, I think this is important. Yes, coup in Nigeria, the military interference in Nigeria is old, and this is the fifth successful coup. And I think there is also another attempt that happened and were failure, like the one that happened in Bazoum's time. Two military coup attempt since he was in power in 2022 and 21. This means that since the day one, he was not welcomed on the party level, on the military level, maybe because he's from a minority, an ethnic minority or something. So the idea of having the military organization, Niger, and their interference in the politics, it's normal. Again, this is not the case in Japan. In Japan, it's the first military coup that happened in the state. Yes, there were previous attempts against Omar Bongo and Ali Bongo in 2019, but was not successful. And there is another attempt that happened in 1964, but was confronted by Paris. If we talk about the last level, which is the idea of the coups in Niger or Japan and the reaction of the international community, we found that it's totally different in both cases. Sure, in a nutshell, please, because we're running out of time. Regarding the Niger and the Japan reaction, in terms of Niger, we find that internally the military leadership was confronting and were very strict compared to Japan. Also, the regional level, ECAS, for example, ECAS organization, they're dealing with what happened in Japan is more acceptance and quiet compared to their situation with Niger, because Niger is the last place for democracy in ECOWAS. As for the international level, it's very, very different between Japan and Niger, because Niger, for example, this is an important country and one of the biggest countries in terms in West Africa in terms of the area, the French and the United States military bases, more than 7% of uranium, and one of the countries that export irregular and illegal migration. So that's why the whole world is the global interest regarding Niger, because Niger has a lot of opportunities and also has a lot of risks and threats. So that's why we find that the United States situation in terms of Niger, we can understand that it is a careful pragmatism. They're dealing with Niger is different from dealing with France, because France, their options are very limited regarding Niger after all their papers fell in terms of the coastal coups. So we can find that the current situation in Niger is that it is a retardation, a decrease of the French power, and with continuation of refusing the French power. But in Japan, France accepts the military coup as long as they have some kind of acceptance among the public, and that it does not harm their interests. So the situation in the military coup that happened in Japan is different from what happened in Niger. And that's why we noticed that France is overlooking the future military coup makers if it's protecting the interests of France and there is some kind of acceptance. So we can find that Japan came to cut the road on an internal intensive crisis, but in Niger it was because of security conflicts and on the ground, and also the steps that was said by the new government in Japan. They have good level of success that's more than the opportunity of that in Niger. But if there is no advancement in building civil military partnership, I think it will not be successful. And this started, Ali Al-Amizi started to be responsible for economics. Short-term economic map plan was announced as well. And the third point is that there are a lot of differences and similarities between Niger and Japan. Cool. But at the end of the day, the security developments and what's related to the terroristic network in the coastal area might lead us to see in the next future aspects different maps of terroristic might move from the coastal areas to Guinea, a Gulf, specifically in Ghana. And we find that the European Union started to send security missions to Ghana, Benin, and Cote d'Ivoire, and other places. Also, regarding Niger refusing French existence and asking French troops to leave, which is 1,500 soldiers, France has only Chad, and Chad is the only ally next to Mauritania after they were expelled from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So I think that in Chad, there is increasing anger against the policies of France, and so I think France doesn't have an alternative but to take their bases in the region and go back to their own country, because it seems that in the military coup that happened in the Western or Central Africa, that Africans are looking at the existence, the military and economic existence of France as some kind of occupation. They consider it. In September 14th, Western Africa started their new common currency, and they started to get rid of the restrictions of the French franc. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Iman, for this presentation, methodical presentation that is very clear. So now, Dr. Fasiri from the Russian Science Academy, you're talking to us from St. Petersburg.
From Moscow. عايشك شكرا جزيلا. I will speak English. So just a second. I'll speak in English. First of all, let me thank you for the invitation to take part in this meeting. It's a very interesting and new experience for me. And thank you very much for all these present speakers for your insightful presentations. I will focus on the Russian position in relation to the geopolitical process that we're seeing today in West Africa. And I understand that this invitation to participate in the meeting is connected, first of all, with the active role of Russia, which Russia plays in Africa today, and probably with some rumors that accompany this policy. There are a lot of rumors about Wagner Group, about Russia real causes of Russian actions and so on. So I want to concentrate on several points on history of Russian policy in Africa, anti-colonialism as a foreign policy factor, pragmatic interests, and Moscow position regarding the coup d'etat in West Africa and the prospects. Because I think that it is important to talk about Russian politics in Western Africa in some contexts. Today, it seems to me that a lot of observers that it seems to some observers today that the intensification of Russian policy in Africa and in Central Africa and in Western Africa is connected, first of all, with the situation in Ukraine and with the Russian-Western conflict. However, in reality, we can see that Moscow has begun to increase its activity on the continent until 2022. And the first Russian-Africa summit was held in 1919. It was attended by representatives of all countries of the continent, and there were 43 political leaders there. In 2021, an important report on Russian policy in Africa was published by one of the leading Russian universities and think tanks, Higher School of Economics. It contains the recommendations for the implementation of the policy. Finally, in 2023, the second Russia-Africa Forum was held. So, looking at the new history, contemporary history of Russian politics in Africa, I will say that there has been 5 periods, 5 stages of this politics. The first, in 1990s, it was characterized by indifference and Russians' withdrawal from previous obligations. Then, after the assumption of office by President Putin, and until February 2006, when the special representative of President for Africa was appointed, it was characterized by a revival of commercial interest and some political contacts. Then there was a period from 2006 to 2014, before the transition of Russia's relation with the West to confrontation, and before the introduction of anti-Russian sanctions by the United States and the EU. And this period, these 8 years, were characterized by political work with Africa within the framework of G8 and BRICS, against the backdrop of individual investments by mining companies that were not systematically linked with the interests of Russia in general as a state. Then we had after Crimea, after 2014 and until 2022, it was the previous period, I mean, I would say that there were 5 characteristics of it. First, understanding of the need to strengthen Russia's positions in Africa, to return to the continent, increasing interests in Africa at all levels of the Russian political hierarchy, in ministers, departments, and so on. It was important. Then, unstable growth of Russian exports to Africa against the backdrop of declining investments, concentration on service contracts and exports at this period. Then the intensification of political contacts with very demonstrative political context. The number of summit and high-level meetings has increased, but but there was a problem of substantive agenda of these meetings. Sometimes it remains insignificant, and the result of this of such meetings so far has been the demonstration of demand for Russia, in the non-Western world. Then the formation of the situational political alliances with African countries, and the most well-known of these alliances is the Russian politics and the special relations between Russian government and the government of Central African Republic, and linked with this point was the intensifying Russia's participations in security issues in Africa. After Ukraine, after special military operations, after 2022, a new period began, and it is characterized by increasing political cooperation with Africa in the context of the confrontation between Russia and the West. At this period, an important one of the main characteristics of this period is the anti-colonial discourse rhetoric of Russian leaders. Russia is positioning itself as a leading anti-colonial force, and the fight against neocolonialism is becoming one of the main components of Russian foreign politics policy in general. This causes mixed reactions from African partners. I know it. On the one hand, the anti-colonial rhetoric itself makes them understand, but they don't always trust it, and sometimes they believe that behind it is Moscow's simple desire to win them over to its side in the conflict with the West. And there is no real anti-colonial, thinking in Moscow. I believe that such a critical assessment is not entirely fair. Firstly, Russia, unlike Western countries, really doesn't have colonial experience in Africa, and African countries are not perceived here as a sphere, here I mean in Moscow, as a sphere of traditional Russian influence. It's important. This is what makes Russia fundamentally different from the European countries. Secondly, Russia has no idea of an ideal political system, and in this regard, it is fundamentally different from the United States. The previous speakers in very interesting presentations, you always talked about democracy, but it's funny that we're talking while we're talking about Africa or the Middle East, we're talking about two things in the same time, about lack of democracy from the one hand and corruption and nepotism from the other hand. And democratization, from our point of view, sometimes is a false process. Sometimes we don't speak about a real deep political or social political transformation, but we're talking about some democratic institutes like elections and so on, which are not based on a real social, economical, or social political basis. So that's why in Russia we prefer to talk about institutions, about the statehood, statehoodness of Africa, but not about them, not just for Africa, but for all the world, but not about the democracy itself. Finally, thirdly, Russia doesn't have a much economic power as China, which means it has no desire to become a new hegemon in Africa. In essence, Russia's main interest in the transformation of sub-Saharan Africa into an independent center of power within the framework of a new polycentric world order. Such a transformation in itself will mean to convergence of the positions of Russia and African countries on key issues of global agenda. So it is a framework. All this is a framework for politics in Russia. I should add here some ideas about our pragmatic interests. Transforming Africa, into one of the centers of power requires two things: strengthening national security on the one hand, and socio-economic development on the other. Russian help and cooperation with Russia, in our opinion, may be of interest of both the African side and the Russian side. Russia understands security in a comprehensive manner. This includes military political security, strengthening the defense capability of individual African states. Secondly, the epidemiological security and strengthening healthcare system and food security. You all know very well that in all the three areas, Russia has been actively working with African countries in recent years. As for socio-economic development, we're talking about the export of Russian made goods to African countries, which is especially important for Moscow now when we're under sanctions. And we're talking about export of Russian education, which still remains in great demand in Africa. In general, the states of West Africa, now talking about the West Africa, are not among Russia's most significant partners in this African politics, either from an economic or political point of view. Russia's main cooperation with Africa has always been with Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Nigeria, and South African Republic. Economically, these five countries. Economically, these five countries.
دكتور حسيني لو يمكن نختم.
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
تفضل.
Economically, they account for approximately 2/3 of Russia's trade. For the West Africa, accounts for approximately a fifth of Russian exports to African continent and 16% of imports from Africa. This is the data for 2021, but I don't think that they have changed a lot. The coup d'etat that have occurred in recent years in these countries which I'm talking about, as you can see, didn't take place in those countries that are probably connected with Russia or that are in priority of Russian foreign policy. Moreover, Moscow's official statements regarding this coup d'etat have always been very restrained. Moscow, in principle, is not a big supporter of an unconstitutional change of power. And yet, we all saw that during the coup d'etat, many participants in street demonstrations took the streets with the Russian flags and the portraits of Putin and so on. Despite the fact that Russian trace was not found in any of these cases, a natural question arises about the reasons for this sympathy towards Russia and how Moscow can use these sympathies. We in Moscow interpret these sympathies, first of all, as a manifestation of the anti-Westernism of the protesters. They're tired for France or the United States of colonial pressure on the one hand, and of the moralizing tone of American politics on the other hand. Against this background, the Russian approach, less ideological, more focused on issues of security and stability, evokes sympathy among the people. It is also evidence of West African decreasing economic dependence of France. And finally, it seems to us that rejection is caused by the West's desire to solve its problems with someone else's hands and its inability to effectively solve them with its own. France was unable to ensure stability and security in West Africa, and after the coup d'etat in Niger, an attempt was made to change the situation with the help of other African states. This further reduced the trust in the West. Of course, Moscow must today take advantage in the current situation and the existing sympathy for it. To take advantage means to demonstrate the correctness of the path proposed by Moscow, to contribute to the strengthening of security in this region and the formation of more stable state institutions in it. The defense agreement, which was mentioned several times today, is the first step on this path. I think that the success of this political transformation which we're looking now will be very important for Russian politics in the region in general, because it will show the effectiveness of Russian approach. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Fasili, for this presentation. About Russian policies towards Africa in general, now we'll go back to our colleagues and we'll receive some of the questions from the attendees. And I have my own questions as well that I want you all. Can you hear me? Professor Fayumi, can you hear me? From the things we have mentioned is that the corruption of regimes and the weak development and the lack of good governance in these countries, these are a factor for passing military coups in general, because at the end of the day, ولكن أيضا also regarding development, regarding security and stability, I think military regimes did more than civil regimes. So do you think that military regimes or governments are capable of providing better political performance compared to civilians? The floor is yours, Ms. Fayumi. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. In Nigeria, in West Africa, the level of corruption is on the high side. I cannot see what military juntas will perform. They may not do anything differently, because they are part of the systemic problem. They are part of the corruption in the system. In the military, the money allocated, to quell insurgency in the sub-region will be diverted by their commanders and all that. So the corruption in the military is also on the high side. So I cannot see, the miracle the military juntas will perform in the sub-region of West Africa. Number one, you will discover that the sub-region itself, in terms of colonial linkage, have, 3 colonial masters: the French, the British, the Portuguese. And the countries were created arbitrarily. So there is no unity. And for this, recurrent coup d'etat, it is expected. But then I cannot see military juntas performing miracle or doing something differently. Thank you.
الصوت ما فيش صوت بروفيسور.
Dr. Jamal, you also justified military coup in Niger, saying that security conditions were bad and that corruption and other things. So the military organization, isn't it originally responsible for the bad security situations? They should be responsible for fighting terrorism. So if there is inability to stop the extension of the terrorist groups, so I think the military organization is originally responsible for that, not the civilians. And also, do you think that Abdurrahman Chiani and the military coup group, do you think that they don't have self-interests in that coup? And to make this political change, don't you think that they are part of the 10-year regime at the era of Muhammad Yusuf president? Don't you think that all of the governmental and political uh, dishes are responsible during the Bazoum era regarding the deterioration of the security conditions and the spread of terrorism? Aren't they responsible for the relationship with France? Do you think that Bazoum led to the foundation of Niger following France? But is France already there? And all of the organizations there were serving the interests of France more than serving the interests of the people. Dr. Jamal? Maybe Dr. Jamal can't hear me. Dr. Jamal, are you here? Maybe Dr. Jamal can't hear us. So, Dr. Iman, the question is for you now. Military organization in Niger, aren't they responsible for the deterioration of the security conditions, at least? Dr. Iman, I agree with you totally on this issue that it is natural that the security mission should be the responsibility of the military organization that should be responsible for security. Add to this that Mohammed Bazoum regime since March 2021 until the 26th of May 2023. So he was in power is not is less than 2 years. So I think the deterioration of the security situation was it only the problem was only the problem of 2 years, but was since the other president from 2010 until 2021. I think we need to know that, and we need to know that I think it's natural that it is a stabilization treatment period for locally, regionally, and internationally. France is in Niger since 1960, and they never left, even after independence. The idea that they are manipulating and they have monopoly over uranium and other natural resources. This is not the problem of Bazoum 2-year regime. So trying to stick that accusations, all of the problems and security issues to Bazoum's period of less than 2 years, methodologically speaking, this is unacceptable. So I think that they have external issues regarding the different in general, but the idea is that there are reasons, and also regarding the disagreement on management, the resources of fuel, oil, and energy, and gold. And I think we have the same in Egypt, the idea of deep state and a political regime on the government. And also since 2010 to 2021, this also led to their stabilizing their pillars and their components. And I think we all know that there are conflicts between Bazoum and the presidential guard, and also dismissing the presidential guard head in 2021. This indicates that Mohammed Bazoum could not strengthen his power, and but the previous political system regime did not allow him the chance. So the idea of accusing Bazoum's period of all of the things while it was only less than 2 years, I think this is unacceptable because the security politician. So, and also the military organization could not know how to deal with the situation after Bazoum. So they said, maybe, how can we deal with it before Sezon? And also we have seen that there are experiences from the military organization in the coast area in Mali. And the idea in Mali is that a lot of terrorist attacks are happening. And also this led to the military organization's existence. I, I What we noticed that in the ideology in Gabon said that the general public does not value the military regime, and sometimes some people would say that it is better than democracy. I agree that the public opinion is tending towards accepting military regime more than they're tending towards a democracy, even if the military organization was not proven to be correct in many of the political situations yet. Thank you very much. Dr. Vasili, can you hear me, Dr. Vasili? Yes. Do you think that the intervention or the existence of Russia and Mali improved the military and security challenges and also limiting the spread of terrorist groups? You know that recently there was an attack, and also they dominated some of the entities or some of the places for Mali. I think there were some Russian soldiers there, and also Timbuktu was under the siege. So I think that, and also there is no improvement in the political side, even if we have military Russian existence in Mali currently.
Uh, Thank you. Yes, thank you for this question, Professor. Of course, the problem of combating terrorism is a very significant and very difficult problem. We have a successful experience of Russian military attendance, for example, in Central African Republic. And it was and it is very successful. But the situation in Mali is quite different, and it is much more difficult, including because of a number of reasons, including the geographical reasons. I don't think that there is any other successful experience of combating terrorism there. But as for a general view of if the situation has improved after Russian, not intervention, but engagement in the situation in Mali or not, I think it can be very different. But there were terrorist attacks before it, and there are terrorist attacks now. So I think that of course I can't say that Russian military assistance in the region is a panacea, and then you can resolve all the problems with terrorist groups, with extremism, and so on, all over the world, and including in every country. But I think that the problem, and in general Russian attitudes to the problem, is that we should strengthen the military force of African countries themselves, because in fact the sovereignty and the national security, it can be a good, can be something you can export to such country. And I think that it is the main difference between Russian approach and French, for example, approach. So, but we'll see. Maybe it is just my impression of Russian politics. You know, I'm not in Kremlin.
Thank you very much. You're not the representative of or the spokesperson of the Russian government. You're speaking your own point of view. We understand this. It's your personal opinion. Dr. Jamal, can you hear me? Yes, doctor, I have written down your questions. Can I answer them? Yes, in a nutshell, please. Yes, doctor, from my own point of view, I think that regarding the idea that the military is responsible for the ancient relation between the democratic governments and France, I think that in Niger, our military is always following the head of the state, the president. So usually he is the supreme commander of the military forces. So I think this is the situation because the military is following the president. So regarding the, and I think they might think something else because they are elected and is responsible for that, and he's responsible for everything, and he's responsible for solving this situation. So I think that in Niger, when there is an agreement between Niger and other, I think they will agree because sometimes they don't refuse because they were not elected. Yes, military is now military is not elected and the president is thrown aside. But the question in general, does the military is the military responsible for the problems regarding security or not? It is difficult to say that because military is being killed every day in different fronts. Yes, but Bazoum said that the some of the terrorists have more efficiency compared to the military. So the army is not capable of securing security of the country and the nation, but they are only capable of arresting and the president and making a military coup. How is that be logical? How do you justify this? How do you understand it, you personally? How are you convinced with this? Doctor, I'm saying that the President Bazoum, when he says that the military is not trained as the training of the terrorists and that the terrorists use modern weapons, this means that he should have done more for the military to be stronger. So when the military makes a coup, maybe after the coup, they will find a better solution for themselves. Yes, but why didn't that armed military go against Mohammed Yusuf, who was there for 10 years and there were a lot of security challenges in the nation? Yes, for doctor, everything has its own time. We are Muslims and we're believers and we believe that everything has its own time. So this is religious justifications for politics. Yes, but even if the military at Yusuf's time, when if he wanted to do that, and they attempted a lot, but Al-Bazoum's 26th attempt was a successful one. Yes, thank you. Dr. Fayoumi, a question that I think the main axis for understanding the region. Don't you think that the weakness of the national state and the fragility of the national state and the ineffectiveness and inefficiency of the governing and governance tools in Western Africa are the main reasons for the coup, for the military coup? We don't have political establishments or institutions that have ancient roots of traditions. And after half a century of independence, whether full or partial independence, uh, again, from France, I think the political elite could not build strong foundations and institutions for the state that will be capable of being feared by others, including the military organization. Military organization should be afraid of the civilian powers. If you have an elected parliament and its weight is zero against the presidential guard head in Gabon or in Niger, or a military squad that was originally established to protect the presidency in Guinea, now they are governing through the coup. Go ahead, Dr. Fayumi.
Yeah, thank you. The primary role of the military is to protect the territorial integrity of the countries. That is the primary role of the military, protect the territorial integrity of the country. Why is it that they are protecting the president? They are not supposed to protect the president alone. They are supposed to protect the territorial integrity of the country. And then, in my submission, I mentioned some factors, responsible for military coup in West Africa. Number one is the corruption of the civilian regime, corruption of the elected leaders. They mismanage the resources, the abundant resources of the countries. I only mentioned that in the Francophone West African states, the wave of coup d'etat became so rapid, so urgent, to the extent that everybody now started questioning why Francophone West African countries, why not Anglophone? What about Lusophone? How come it is rampant, this coup d'etat is rampant in the Francophone? Then we now have to look inward to also unravel the exploitative tendencies of the French government. So it's also one of, now, mismanagement of the public fund, high level of corruption, nepotism, poor infrastructural facilities for the people, yes, may also, they are also, interrelated, factors responsible for this coup d'etat. And I said something about bad leadership and also irresponsible followership. Everybody should be blamed in West African sub-region in terms of this persistent, or let me say the current, coup d'etat and the wave. Everybody is responsible, the leadership and the followers. Yes, we cannot exempt anyone. Now, like I said, that the military cannot do any miracle, they cannot, perform differently in the sense that they have been part of this system. They have been part of this system. They are also looking for how to loot the treasury, the public fund. That is what the military is looking for. They will not do anything. They could not quell the insurgency. The insurgency is still rampant in the West African sub-region. Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, everywhere in West Africa is experiencing one insurgency or the other. So where is the military? Is the military not supposed to protect us from these attacks? So what are they doing in governance? What are they doing? They're only going there, to engage in corruption. So I believe that is the factors responsible for coup d'etat in West Africa are interrelated, complex, and complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fasili. There is a question directed to you by one of the audience. His name is Mr. Ahmed Al-Maliki. Can you hear me, Dr. Vasili?
Yes, yes.
نعم أسمع. Ahmed Al-Malik is asking a question that can be answered shortly. Is Russia trying to create an African model of Cuba? This is a question.
Of the
Does
African model of
is of Cuba?
Cuba. No. No, I don't think that. Look, it was the short answer to the question, but if I can, I will say I'm sure that President Putin, he has really his own, I will say, philosophy of foreign policy. I am sure that he, and not just he, but Russian establishment, they are against political engineering. They don't try to create new Cuba, new Afghanistan, because the experience of Iraq, of Libya, of Afghanistan was very sensitive for Russia. And it is very important for Russia. They're sure that it is impossible to create something from abroad. And it is the main point. For they're not against the democracy, they're not pro-democracy, they're pro-statehood, pro-institutions. Talking about military forces, if I can, I would just because it is, I think it is very important moment. Talking about military forces, I think that sometimes while we're talking about armies in Africa or in the Middle East, it seems to me that we're talking about some theoretical handbook, I don't know, about the army and political system, but there is a reality. In reality, the role of military forces in Africa and in the Middle East too is not limited by the direct military duties, defensive duties, it is a political role, like in Egypt, like in Algeria, like in historically in Iraq, and so on. And sometimes these military elites, army elites, they can be providers of modernization, of development, and of stability. This it is a fact. Yes, it is authoritarian stability, but it is not. But to tell the truth, there are more authoritarian countries in the world than democratic. Maybe unfortunately, it is a fact. I'll stop here, but I hope that I have responded. Finally, about the Cuba, I don't think that Cuban experience has been very successful for the moment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vasili. Dr. Iman, there is an intervention from the researcher Samia bin Yahya from Algeria. It's long, but I will try to brief it and direct it to you. She says that Africa is witnessing now a new wave of like filtering against the occupations and colonialism. How do you comment on that? Indeed, Africa, since 2020, is witnessing a new wave of filtering out colonialism, especially French colonialism, because French colonialism is known that it was governing through direct governing. It's different from British colonialism. British colonialism was using indirect tools of governance. So French governance was intervening without brokers, without proxies. But in terms of Britain, they used tools or indirect tools or proxies. So all the time, the French colonialism was always considered as taking advantage and using and that's why we find all of this wave of the change in the internal public opinion in Western Africa countries against Francophonism, and also in the future it might go towards Congo area, Congo bit area, and Cameroon, also Equatorian Guinea, and also Congo, Gabon, and others. All of these countries are also were colonized by France. So we will notice that there is a wave, a revolutionary wave of public opinions internally in Africa against the French colonialism. So these mottos of nationalism that were raised by military coups in Western Africa, these logos and mottos were accepted a lot in the streets, whether in Mali or Burkina Faso or Niger. It is now a weapon that is used, and even in Niger, when the logos and mottos of nationalism started going towards fighting French colonialism, we found that the internal public opinion is supporting this. And we find this also noticed in terms of the formation of military coup in Africa after the Cold War is different from that before the Cold War. In terms of the parties, because actors in the African continent is now not the superpowers. Before the Cold War, it was supported because of the conflict between two superpowers, like the US worked against Kwame Nkrumah. They killed him, and also Russia killed Mengistu in Ethiopia. So when we notice the situation after the Cold War, we find that the actors here are different. They're actors from inside the government, the African continent. We have the military council or the youth, African youth, and they are finding this support from the street, and they're uh, walking with these nationalist logos. And this is the first difference between coup against before Cold War and after Cold War. Dr. Iman, thank you very much. And apologies. Your idea is clear. I'd like to thank all the colleagues who participated with us today, Dr. Vasily from Moscow, Dr. Jamaluddin Muhammad min Niamey, and Dr. Fayumi from Nigeria, and Dr. Iman Abdulazim from Cairo. And I'd like to thank all attendees for this, for being with us, and the good number of attendees who attended with us. And I'd like to thank you all from King Faisal Center for Research in Islamic Studies. And this is me, Dr. Muhammad Swaitli, and this is what I was with you from the African Studies Department at King Faisal Center. I'd like to thank you again, and we hope we see you again soon in the next events. Thank you, and peace be upon you all.